Welcome to the MHP Exchange podcast, where industry veterans Frank Rizzo and Eric Busadil generously share their wealth of knowledge in their new podcast dedicated to the manufactured housing space. They tackle tough questions to provide valuable insights for those considering investments in mobile home parks. If you're seeking answers in the manufactured housing space, this podcast is your go-to resource.
We're back on the MHP Exchange podcast. I'm your host, Frank Rizzo. Joining me, as always,
I'm good, Frank.
is my partner, Eric Busadil. How are you today, Eric?
I'm good, Frank.
Glad to hear it. We have a very special podcast for you today. Today, we're going to talk about how we love to handle park-owned homes, how we love to handle them in the underwriting process, how we handle them once we own the community. And to do this podcast, we thought one of the great things, or the interesting thing, is we could actually do it from inside a park-owned home. So we're sitting in one of our model homes in Jacksonville, North Carolina, a brand new 3-bedroom, 2-bath Dutch Elite. And we're going to talk about how everything that we like to do with park-owned homes from beginning to end. And I will tell you, and I'll just say this, in probably the decade you and I have been doing this together, Eric, I believe that my view has changed a bit in terms of, buying a park with homes and how to handle those homes. But I don't think that we address the park-owned home situation or underwrite the park-owned home situation in the same way we did from day one.
No, it's definitely evolved, as most things do, and I think, as you scale up, right, it needs to evolve. Depending on what type of operator you are. When you're on your first park or your second park and you're managing them yourselves, you may be doing things one way, and the more and more parks that you buy, the more you realize. I don't want us to say it's the same exact thing over and over again, but you're always getting a mixed bag of nuts, and it's the same types of homes at every property that you're buying.
And I think the overall thesis that people have, and when they look at investing in the mobile home park space, is that you want to have a community where there's a tenant-owned home base. And if you have park-owned homes, you want to transition them to tenant-owned homes. And I've seen, and we've seen, where when we first would underwrite deals, we would discount that park-owned home income completely. And in some cases, and from your perspective, you've seen that banks have they'll diminish that park-owned home income portion. So in the underwriting process, so a lot of times you find people who are trying to underwrite specifically on lot rent only.
Well, again, it's mixed, right? And that's our model. Like, our model is we want to transition people into owning their own home, and our parks being tenant-owned home communities.
But from a financing perspective?
Well, from a financing perspective, the bank is looking primarily at the income stream to the land, right, Frank? So, we look to, turn a renter into a homeowner, and ultimately transition them into owning a home and just paying lot rent.
Yeah, and the idea is that becomes more financeable and that becomes more bankable, because in some cases these homes become depreciating assets, or at least from a lender's perspective. The homes themselves, these homes will have an NADA value, basically a book value of what that home, that year, that make, that model may be worth in the marketplace. And so from a lender's perspective, and I know you have a huge background in commercial and residential lending, it's difficult lending, right? I would imagine it's difficult lending on a depreciating asset.
Yeah. Well, it's a different type of financing for the home itself, Frank. And yes, these homes could be moved, right? So ultimately, the lender is primarily, again, lending on the land, even though, even though, you do have some lenders that will give some value to the homes. I mean, the newer the home, the better. But I think ultimately, it's the land and the income stream to the land that a bank is underwriting the loan based on.
And one of the things that we love to do when we're looking at a new park, and we're agnostic. Like, we'll look at parks that have park-owned homes and with different year makes and models. So we're not so in a box where we'll discount a community that has a park-owned home mix, right? Some of the best communities that we've acquired did have a mix of park-owned and resident-owned home or tenant-owned homes. But we found, right, and I think you could talk from experience, that we found that when we buy a park like that, you have to be very specific about what you're going to do with those homes on site. Like, you have to have a plan from day one in terms of what's the intention, how are we going to get those homes activated, or how we are going to transition those park-owned homes to a tenant-owned home.
Right. In combination, Frank, yes, of what are you doing with the park, right? I think the system that we have now, I think ultimately we came upon that system in grading these homes, from, A all the way up to an F. Like I said before, is because we got to a scale that this was the best way for us to uniformly, communicate with our park managers and our team across all the communities, right? We have a sales team that's not on site, right? So some of our salespeople have never seen some of the homes that they're selling. So we came up with a system that, A, obviously being the best home, and F being the worst home, that's a system that's been working successfully for us.
And to go further into that, right, in terms of that grading system, which has helped us, I think, tremendously in terms of onboarding a park and getting the team in place to know exactly what they need to be doing with which homes. Homes that are, third-party chattel lending in the space, they have very specific criteria. So if you have a home that's within 15 to 20 years old, that might still be eligible for chattel financing for the end user. So like you mentioned before, the ideal scenario is that the residents own their home. When the residents own their home, it creates stability in the community. It allows the residents know that their next door neighbor isn't transitioning out every year, that they're going to have that pride of ownership. And then for us as operators, we can focus on what we do best: the safety, the security, the beautification, adding amenities, and making sure the resident experience inside of our community is second to none. So to move those homes from a park-owned home to a tenant-owned home, there's a process. So when we look at homes that are A-rated homes, those are homes that we know immediately could be financed from a third-party lender, right? And so we know that if we offered those homes for sale at a discount to their NADA value, we can essentially sell those homes, let the resident find their own financing, and then we can just be in the position of charging, of collecting the lot rent and maintaining the community for them, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then that scaling system, like the B-rated home, would be something that's on the cusp of being able to get financed, but really needs to have some improvements done to get that value.
I mean, listen, you could get into, look, if you spend enough money on a home that has good bones, you really could bring it back to life. And you really have to look at your budget, look at what you're trying to accomplish, and you need to make that determination. How far down that road do you want to go, right? If you're buying a community that, has a handful of homes, let's say that we would call, B or C homes, and you have the capital and the means of doing the work to that homes, I mean, that's gonna, determine whether or not you're gonna put the money into those homes so they could become financeable. And then you may do that, and a year may go by, and your capital may be depleted, and you may switch to selling some of those homes as is, right? Which is typically our D home or worse.
Correct. So I think how we looked at it was the B home was if we invested a bit of capital, those homes are financeable because the year is right, the make is right, the value is there, and if we deployed, $5,000 in terms of upgrading what's in that, in that home, we know that there's a high likelihood of being able to exit through a third-party financing liquidity event on that home and move forward. And then you make you make the mention of the C homes. Those C homes are good homes, maybe a little bit older in quality, early 90s, mid to late 80s, where there's still a value. The bones are good, but we also know that those homes aren't financeable. So if we sold them, we're probably looking to sell them on a short-term RTO or for a cash payment, right? For somebody willing to come in there and maybe willing to have a little bit of an older stock home in a really decent condition, right?
Yeah.
And then the D homes obviously are the ones that need a significant amount of work. And I think those are the homes where either you sell it to an investor for cash, somebody who's looking at a real discount, who has the qualifications and ability to renovate that home.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no exact recipe for everybody, right? If you're buying a community and you plan on being there and operating it yourself, and you're handy, or you have a crew that can do some of the work, and you have the capital, of course, you may be able to bring a home back to life that we wouldn't make a decision to do. I think one.
Would be a Lonnie deal.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that someone should look at if they are considering putting the money into a home is, what is the plan for resale? Do you have third-party lenders that are willing to lend to people inside your community, and will that home meet those standards? If not, that means that a buyer is going to either A, have to buy the home cash, or you're going to have to finance that home. So you got to do the numbers, and again, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. We're just speaking about what has worked for us.
Yeah, and then obviously the F homes are the ones that we come in day one and jump. And you're right, E, the way that this has evolved has been a couple from a perspective of what's going to work inside that market, right? How are we going to be able to transition those residents to be tenant-owned homes, and what works for us inside of our model and our investment thesis of how we like to own and operate communities. But we found that grading system obviously has helped streamline that process and has eliminated, because I know early on in our career at Grove Estates, where there was a number of homes that were maybe C, what we would classify as C homes, but once we got into doing that repair work, right, in those homes, which were older models, an $8,000 job became a $12,000 or $15,000 job. And then not that we didn't end up getting that capital back over time, but we didn't have that capital to deploy into the next home as fastly or as efficiently as we may have wanted to do that.
And Frank, don't forget about the safety, right? Obviously, money is very important. Do you have the capital to do it? But you also want to make sure that you're not putting money into a home that, is not going to meet, the standards of, the city. You want to make sure that the wiring's intact, and, you're able to pass inspections, right? Last thing you want to do is put money into a home that's not going to pass inspection and ultimately is not going to be a safe home for a consumer, right? So that's where you should make sure you're really looking at first, and then from there, what would it cost to bring that home to safe standards for an end user?
And on top of, one of the things that we've also realized and recognized to do in the communities that we own, right? On all the park-owned homes that are going to stay, regardless if we're not really doing significant interior work to them, we always, we love making sure that the exterior of those homes, skirted, painted, sided, cool sealed roof, right, freshened up, because at the end of the day, if we're looking to attract a new home or bring in new homes on site, having the exteriors cleaned and homogenized makes for a nicer looking community and starts to create a standard across the board, which is very important. And we always start on our homes or all the park-owned homes first. So in some instances, I almost prefer having a portfolio, buying some park-owned homes, because we're able to set the standard or the expectation before we start talking to other residents about what they should be doing or looking to do in terms of the exterior of their homes, whether it's, additional skirting or freshening up with a paint job or doing some cool seal to the roof.
Well said, Frank.
And I guess to finalize the point, I think one of the things that we've grown doing, and one of the ways that we love looking at these park-owned homes that are on site, we always underwrite to lot rent, because that is something that is predictable, right? But we look to capitalize on the park-owned homes. So if we can sell those homes and we could utilize those sales to capitalize the projects inside of the community, that to us is a win-win. And that's where we found a lot of value. Underwriting to lot rent, where we can move those homes to market over time or infill those communities with new homes to get closer to market rent, lot rent, but also capitalize the projects that we're looking to do by selling those homes, especially those A and B rated homes, for a value, and being able to utilize that capital to reinvest in the park. And that's helped us keep our capital improvement projects in line with expectations and capitalize the projects going forward.
Listen, there's a lot of different ways that individuals will look at these homes, but I think ultimately, you have to take a look at the homes. What's your budget? What's your plan with the community? Yes, Frank, the exterior of the homes are very important. I think we've done a good job, phasing out the old homes that don't meet the standards, the safety, and the look of the community over time. But I think, again, every operator is going to look at it a little bit differently, and the longer you're in it, I'm sure your model is going to evolve the longer you're inside of this space.
Absolutely, but don't discount park-owned homes in a community. If you have an opportunity to look at a community that has park-owned homes and you have questions on how you should underwrite it, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll walk you through that process. We're happy to look at your mobile home park deals to see what you need to do to get involved in the mobile home park space. You could reach us at the MHPExchange.com. Send us a comment and ask us questions about you have on your deal, and we're happy to walk you through it.
Right. Definitely call us if you're looking to underwrite a file. But if you're not sure about putting money into a home or multiple homes, or you've never done it before, please feel free to reach out to us. A conversation with us could save you a lot of time and money, or at least help you feel confident about the decision that you're making with that home.
This has been, I think, a great episode just to give you an idea of what to do at park-owned homes. This is how we love to handle that, but we'd love to hear from you. You could reach us at the MHPExchange.com. Until next time, I'm Frank Rizzo.
Over.